Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
You've reached another, hi. You've reached another Poetry Flash virtual event. And we're really delighted that you're here with us today for a reading and discussion with Ken Haas, Erin Rodoni, and Eliot Schain. Love poems and why now? And I just want to tell you that in the chat box, there is a link to bookshop.org. And if you find that link, it says to purchase books by today's readers. You can purchase all of the books by today's readers by going to that link. It's a wonderful organization that supports independent bookshops. It's partly through Mo's Books, in collaboration with Mo's Books. And if you go to that link and scroll down, you'll see the covers of all of the books by the recent books by the readers today. And also there is a link there for that goes to the Poetry Flash mailing list. If you want to, if you're not on our email list and want to join announcements for, and get announcements for our readings, that would be great. And this reading is going to be recorded and is going to be posted on the Poetry Flash Facebook page. So you'll be able to see it and share it from there after the event. Now I'm going to give you Richard Silberg, who is going to do the introduction, our associate editor.
Hello there, boys and girls. I'm going to be introducing everyone starting, so I'll be talking for a little while. You might want to get up and get yourself a beer and make a sandwich, and then you can settle into what's going to be a very interesting event here. Now, these are three very able and rather different poets. And so it'll be interesting to see how they interweave in their reading, and then they'll be talking. Joyce told you the subject will be love poems and why now, and there'll be some talk. Now, Ken Haas, I want to say that this is his first book. And I'm thinking, Ken, you're probably, from reading, you're probably about 60. So this is really a blessed event, kind of late in a poet's life, but beautiful. And the book is Borrowed Light. And these poems come at you fast. They unroll at you like little magic carpets. They're very witty, they're very imaginative. They're often a little bit riddling, so you have to get in there, you have to pay attention. Now there are all different kinds of poems. Some of them address, I think that you are the son of immigrant parents, and some of these poems address that, and they address Nazi Germany and that whole story. There are some very interesting nature poems, and then many poems about childhood, family, and some beautiful love poems. I want to mention, I hope I'm getting the title right, Chemo and Late Love, which is a beautiful, affecting poem. And the book closes with a poem called Speaking in Tongues, which is again a love poem, but also very interesting, addressing, Robert Frost has this idea of the sound of sense. He's going for the sound of nonsense. the kind of atavistic, sacred glossolalia of the poet. You could think, if you know of Michael McClure's Beast Talk. So it's a very interesting book, as you'll hear. Erin Rodoni, I'm going to go to a little baseball metaphor, since we're about to go to playoffs. In baseball, they talk about 5 tool men, people with a natural gift of speed or power. Erin is a tool poet. She's got them. She's got a beautiful, expressive, figurative language that is both provocative and sets mood for the poems. She's got the rhetorical facility we love. And she's got an ardent voice that reaches, it seems to me, for the larger, in love, in the poem. She's going to be reading from some new love poems. She's going to be reading from her book, Body in Good Light, a 16 Rivers book. So let me give a quick kudos to our wonderful 16 Rivers Bay Area collective publishing. Also, Eliot's book, his new book, The Distant Sound, is a 16 Rivers publication. And Erin is also going to be reading from her forthcoming book in 2021, And If the Woods Carry You. So she's a beautiful, affecting poet, as you will hear. And then finally, Eliot. Eliot and I have known each other for more than 30 years. We've been hanging together on the set, as it were. I first got to know him in the late 80s when he had a book called American Romance, which is a kind of a provocative, in-your-face, funny book in the style that went as neo-beat at the time. Then he had a second book, Westering Angels, which is a very different book, a kind of echoing, serious, his poetic version of Manifest Destiny, let's say. And now we've got this new book, The Distant Sound, which is a very unusual book to me. There's a kind of a slide and glide in these poems. Let me get weird here. As you look at these poems on the page, which you will of course be doing after you buy his book, you're going from top to bottom. So these poems are a little bit like sliding ponds in when you were kids, although they're epiphanic slides. You go from the interesting details at the beginning of the poem to an end that's fast and intuitive, and really often very way out, very, very beautiful, very suggestive. So let me be quiet now and let these poets take it all away. Ken, Erin, and Eliot.
Well, thank you, Richard. I'm going to start it off here. And I'm going to read from a script. Hold on, I'm going to get a gallery view because the other one wasn't working for me. Then I can see it, it's great. It's like looking at an audience. We are going to read from a script because we decided to weave and create something different. So let me just go ahead and read it. And if I get improvisational, or any of us do, then we will. So I want to thank you all for coming. We know there's a lot of competition on the screen. We know you may be tired of the screen. We know there are dumpster fires everywhere. So we appreciate those of you who made it here to be with us today. And of course, we thank Poetry Flash, Richard and Joyce for the way they've sustained the poetry community for so long. In light of the world apparently collapsing, we'll be trying something different. We all need to do some things a little differently, so we're going to interweave our voices as we address the concept of love and focus on 4 different aspects of it. There'll be 4 sets, and each poem within a set will address that particular set's theme. Hopefully the poems will talk to each other, as well as talking to you and your unconscious. We'll offer brief intros to each poem. The poet will read the poem and afterwards briefly comment, and you'll see how this works as we go. So I'm going to introduce the first set, which is called How Our Grandmothers Teach Us About Love. The love of elders, many of whom may still be circling, and the reclamation of their wisdom as well as their particular passions has never seemed more critical to sustaining at least parts of the world as we've known it. The first poem is going to be by Erin. She's going to read a poem called Confession. I Never Wanted a Garden. The poem is about a girl or a young woman learning about love as a thing that requires constant work, requires staying present and tending and protecting, and how her perspective and desires shifts as she grows older and becomes a mother herself. Erin?
Thank you, Eliot. And Richard, thank you so much for that generous intro. And Joyce and Richard, both of you, thank you so much for hosting us today. And thank you all for being here. I'm going to just jump right in and read my poem, and then I'll talk a little bit about some inspiration from it. It's called Confession. I Never Wanted a Garden. The women of my family speak flower, not bouquet, not he loves me. Does he love me? Not for decoration or display. They speak flower as in garden, as in down on their knees, up to their elbows in dirt, green thumbs calloused and soil steeped, forearms torn by thorn. The women of my family speak of flowers as if they were their wayward children. They say, my, I don't know what to do about my violet. What am I going to do with my poor rose? As in gophers, as in aphids are devouring her pretty petals, as in sunlight and rain, toil and prune, and yet sickness, and yet death. I confess, I love the bulb and bloom of those names on their tongues, fuchsia, begonia, gladiola, more than I love the routine of seasons. I love the weeds as much, mallow, dandelion, clover, their plain persistence. How lush a garden greens just before those coddled rows are overtaken. My grandma was famous for her dahlias the size of dinner plates. She worked the same patch of dirt into its fever pitch of flower for over 50 years. I never wanted a garden, that perennial metaphor requiring maintenance. I never wanted to stand so still upon a place that it could mold like sandals to my soles. So I don't know how I ended up here saying, mine, my oldest, my baby, my ever-hungry, swift-growing girls. Maybe it's a language we can't escape if we are lucky enough to inch closer and closer to old. The terms change, but there is always the beloved, always our body between it and the cold. The women of my family ease arthritic knees onto wooden hassocks, take communion wafers directly on their tongues. They speak flower as in oil and smoke to smother the pests, as in weeds rooted out relentlessly, ruthlessly. I don't regret our gardens, only the many wilds they replace. Whatever we mother, it is tenderly vicious, this language we speak. So I wanted to just talk briefly about a line at the end of the poem. I don't regret our gardens, only the many wilds they replace. Though this is a poem about the beauty and strength of maternal love, I also wanted to acknowledge that that doesn't come without cost. The wilds refer to both the other lives the speaker may have lived if she didn't become a mother and become rooted to place by love, but also the literal wilds, the creatures that are devalued into weeds and pests because they aren't the objects of our love. How we are tender to the object of our love and vicious to anything that threatens it. And so I'm going to hand it over to Eliot now. He's going to be reading a poem called Jelly Jars, and it's a poem that also talks about what our grandmothers teach us about love and about what we inherit from them. In this poem, it's about the yearning for some kind of permanence in love, about the desire to hold on to the love of a grandmother by cherishing one of her mundane jelly jars, used as a cup to drink from long after she is gone. And turn it over to you, Eliot.
Thank you, Erin. Do you remember those jelly jars that had faces etched into them? I think it was Welch's, I don't know. But that's those are what I'm referring to here. Jelly jars. My grandmother, who was a large woman in a small apartment by the time I knew her, would squeal when handling the Flintstone jelly jars she used for serving juice. She'd fill them up and marvel at the way some cheerful TV cartoon kept lingering in her home. Years later, after graduating college, I stayed with her and again would get the jelly jars, taken reverentially from the open shelf in the tiny alcove, and hear her marvel at the wonders of modernity, how a character can be fused into glass that might just be delivering jelly, but for this woman, given what she'd endured, remained the gift to share with me. My grandmother was a great storyteller. I learned my family's history on my father's side primarily from her. And given that most of what she told me took place in the first half of the 20th century to immigrants, the stories reflect hope, but also a lot of trauma. Yet she endured. Now I'm going to introduce Ken, who's going to read a poem entitled Madam Butterfly. It's a piece about his paternal grandmother, who literally saved his family by convincing her stubborn and patriotic husband, Ken's grandfather, to leave Germany just before Kristallnacht in 1938.
Thank you, Eliot. I also want to thank Joyce and Richard. Ever since I moved to the Bay Area 40 years ago, or most of that time, it's been a bucket list goal of mine to have Richard introduce me. So I can now, check that off the list happily. So this is called Madam Butterfly. She was the kindest woman anyone knew, though to me, the grandma who wanted to talk when the Yankees were on, how school was, if I had nice friends, her pastille breath, galore perfume, and mashed potato breasts, the organs of suffocation, armchair bound by gout with a taut bob of pewter hair, ringed by jardinières of lilies, she fed me apples with the tart skin pared off in splendid curls. Her grasp of the undeniable had saved a family, moved a stiff-necked man to quit their homeland where he was sure reason would return. But as she would tell me when we had taken in yet again the scuffed rendering of her favorite Puccini, and I had remarked on the stupidity of the heroine's devotion to a jerk, the story is just housing for the music, which I've repeated since to dates in business suits, appalled by Butterfly's sacrifice. The blade of her voice calling to those who have lost the trail of love, that you can start again here, boxed in brilliance, hanging by a thread. Just a brief comment. For me, this poem's about creating love in confinement, and also about sacrifice. When I knew my grandmother, she was essentially confined by her age and health, but figured out how to generate love from whatever pleasures she had nearby. Licorice, mints, which were the pastilles, fruit, flowers, and especially music. Her favorite, the opera Madame Butterfly, is narratively about sacrifice, though the music both honors and rises above that idea. Sacrifice, particularly in the context of love, has always seemed a dated idea to me, though maybe it's making a mini comeback nowadays as we think about our moral obligations during the pandemic. And I think music has helped many of us during our own confinement. I've picked up my guitar again after 30 years and find that I'm drawn to playing love songs, which I know sounds a bit sentimental, which is about the worst thing a poet can be, but hey, give it a try. Now we'd like to move to our second set of poems, and the theme of what our bodies teach us about love, which is perhaps another way of saying what our grandmothers didn't teach us about love. Eliot's going to start us off in this set with two poems. The first is How We Love, about how passion opens us up into areas of consciousness that provide a respite from obsessions over self, and how a love of the other outside of us is key to calming our disquietudes. Eliot's second poem is called The Risk, and looks at the combination of fear and excitement that comes with lust. Fear that lust will take us to a place we can't return from, and excitement that such a place promises, albeit falsely, eternal ecstasy. So Eliot.
Thank you, Ken. How we love. Walking the path beyond the house in a fog that was thick and disquieting, Jason slipped off his body and entered the voice of a greater authority. And soon the fog became just that moistening of the transcendental eye, and he could feel grief for the plight of everyone, which was less of a beach house crush than the ring within which he grew warm, as the summer fields grow warm, as his God flushes with warm, while plumping up the pillows in her bedroom, eager to move through his disquietude. The Risk. 108 degrees. The leaves look closer than they really are. At my toes, the creek is clinging to the rock, fearing disappearance. Similarly, I could lean into you and trail my fingers through your sweat. but that would be a sin. We are in nature, and yet we are not. A bridled mastery is, even in this heat, struggling to repair the territory. To desert it now would be to elevate the temperature. We might never come down. So I want to say about we might never come down. Jason slipped off his body and entered the voice of a greater authority. We all have suspicions about passion, how it takes over, and we call it the devil, sometimes God, whatever. It's ambiguous, but it does feel like a greater authority and pierces the defensive barrier we erect around ourselves. Ken's now going to read a piece about a couple communicating non-verbally and metaphorically over time by how they shave or don't shave various parts of their bodies. Ken, you're muted.
Yep, yeah, sorry.
Okay.
So thanks, Eliot. This is, I would say, slightly edgy piece. It's called Shaving. She shaves her legs and underarms. I shave my face, close. Feels so good, we stop saying, how good? Some stubble then, on her thighs, on my chin, fine really. Threads sprout on her breasts, wool on my shoulders, feathers on her upper lip, tufts in my ears. Suddenly, her vulva waxed smooth as a grape, followed by a monthly Mons Expo she dubs in turn the landing strip, the postage stamp, the finger wave, the psycho shag, the Trotsky. Until I propose, we just start over. Much too late, she replies, but she will let her pubis grow wild again if I shave my scrotum in my head. To which I say, honey, let's both sleep on that. Because she knows I won't deny us any mood of nakedness, old or new, cut or uncut. So anyway, I wanted to do at least one edgy piece today because I sometimes write them, and because good love is sometimes edgy, and as we spend more time in closer quarters with one another, that edge I think tends to come out. So what do we do about it? Well, the natural inclination in close quarters is to avoid the uncomfortable, avoid the edge. But this poem suggests that instead we acknowledge it, we use it to say the unsaid, we use it to challenge one another as equals and to grow. We cut it some slack, and above all, we have fun with it. Erin is now going to read a poem called The Body Compass, which is about loving the mortal body of the beloved, about cherishing even the bones and guts of someone precious to us.
Thank you, Ken. So this poem has quite a different mood. I'll just read it. The Body Compass. True north is the nook behind your knee, where my patella nests like the skull of a small burrowing animal, safe beneath heft of hamstrings cleaved like mollusks to femur, to love the net of capillaries cast across your skin, the drunken mass of liver, spleen, your brain sputtering prayers through bone, is to know I will lose you. True, the stunted wingspan of our twinned clavicles bows toward the window, the body's white breath on the glass. So for me, this poem is about how no matter, even if I'm sure that I'm going to stay together forever with the person I love, even if I believe in an afterlife, which I don't always, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, I'm still bound to lose that body that I've come to love and know so well. And so this is kind of a way to mourn that part of love, that we have to let go of that physical body eventually, even in the best of love stories. And now I'm going to switch us over to our next set, which is Our Partners Teach Us About Love. So just as we share our bodies with our beloveds, we all should also learn to share our lives with them. Whether we stay together for a short while or for our whole lives, we form a unique world with that person, forged of everything we've brought to the relationship, every compromise we make, every challenge we go through. It all creates a little world between us that we have to constantly be learning to live in. And so Ken is now going to read a beautifully tender poem called Breath that serves as a transition between the body and the partner teaching us about love.
Thanks, Erin. So this is called Breath. And it has some echoes actually back to the poem that Eliot read about heat and etc. So breath. One oven of a night in Fiji, our bathing suits getting wetter, hanging out to dry. I dreamed peeling off my skin, but instead, once an hour, tiptoed back and forth along the foot of the bed to change sides, because her body had rolled over again, and I wanted to stay in its breath, in its cool on my face and chest, but also in its grace, the joy she cast even when sleeping, charged with the freshened yet still spiced atoms of a world she had walked barefoot and impassioned. Wisconsin, Argentina, the islands, the bay. With our return to the mainland came the tumors and the science that said, burn her inside out, reseed the marrow. So the body I knew took the form of those beings who wafted off the spaceship at the end of the Spielberg film, gaunt, hairless, bearing nothing but light, and the tones they had placed in our minds. Hands opened upward as if to say, your troubles, put them here. So good there are souls like this among us. So good to walk some more in the wee hours between window and door. Sleep in the last gasp of the dark cells with which I am myself most familiar, roasted to smoke, bowing to a breath now retaking its country. So good to inhale deeply the air of why I am here, with the mango, the gold dust, the tango, the snow. The main things I want to say about this poem in our current context are that I am forever in awe of how our partners and lovers can teach us who we are and why we're here, which is critical to know right now, and which Eliot and Erin have beautifully illustrated. Also, in times like these, when maintaining or trying to maintain a presence indoors and in place can be difficult, using memory and imagination to bring us back or forward to those teachings of our loved ones can be a genuine emotional surrogate for presence. And poetry, writing it or reading it is, of course, a powerful vehicle for remembering, reviving, and ultimately refreshing ourselves. Next is Erin's really terrific poem called Time Capsule Us. This is a poem about a long relationship and its changes, how partners can learn to hold each other through different phases of life and the different versions of ourselves that these phases make of us. So, Erin.
Thank you, Ken. That was a beautiful reading, by the way. Very moving. This poem is Time Capsule Us. Lately, you wear dress shirts and go off to work, and I am often alone, despite the constant baby. Lately, I open the closet when you are gone, and your dress shirts just hang there with their corresponding ties and the absence of you inside. You vanished once on a mountaintop. Mist avalanched the path. It was that thick. The future dimmed down to an inch. And then your hand found mine. So we took it, inch by inch. Love, didn't we dare? These moth-lashed children from the very air. Love, we've curtained countless windows with our breath. This bed conjures all the others. Our accordion of beds aches a long stray moan when stretched. Lately, the baby wakes and wants me hourly, so I sleep with her latched to my breast. See, it's hard to miss your body when I hardly have my own. Lately, I leave for the gym when you get home. I run on the treadmill and go nowhere. Lately, the days race, though I hardly seem to move. But I am not an angry ghost, not bitter, no. I wander home in the best light for gratitude when there is little of it left. Lately, I've been thinking of our first apartment, the bath I hid in when our friend died terribly, and it could have been. My eyes were closed inside the steam. You, it could have been. When they opened, you were waiting on the rim, and I screamed with the fear reserved for seeing what we don't believe in. The scream froze midair, hung there between us, an ice-cold mist. You said I made you feel like a very quiet ghost. I thought it a sign either you or I would die. The mist thickens, resists our will to see beyond it. Or perhaps it is our will that's weak. Lately, I see the bones beneath your gaze, and beneath those, your mind, where I am, as I was, as we change. Lately, I've been thinking maybe love, the kind that lasts a long time, a lifetime, begins to haunt itself. It's not that something's died. No, it survives. So in this poem, I've started it when my younger daughter was an infant and my husband had just begun a new career as a lawyer, which meant that we saw a lot less of each other. And I was remembering the early days of our relationship when it was just the two of us all the time, all day, when we were students, when we went through a tragedy together in our early 20s, when we were backpackers. And it occurred to me how there are so many versions of myself that exist only inside our shared memories. And that when I look at my husband, I also see all these versions of him, all these different ages. And there's this particular sadness that came over me of knowing that when I go, I would take those versions of him with me as well. So that's sort of what I wanted to capture in the poem. And now I'm going to introduce Eliot again. He's going to be reading a love poem for his wife, Mary. It's about how when gazing at someone so long beloved, a transformation often takes place, a drifting of the spirit upwards, as in old medieval devotions. All right, Eliot, it's all yours.
Thanks, Erin. Two things, of course, you should know, or you should know. Bologna, Italy is a university town, so it's good to know that. And it's good to know that swifts are birds. For Mary. In Bologna, my wife studies a menu at a street-side cafe, looking as lovely and self-possessed as the swifts circling the nave of the 6th century church, while medieval organs groan, because we are in the city of the West's oldest university, and inquisitive nature is a minion including mine, now watching us age and grow more beautiful with time, as the stone and tile and the stained glass do in this home of the young, where Mozart came at 14, as did so many others I could name. If only I had loved them half as much as I love this woman and the birds circling as the rings of fragrance rise and seek their dissolution into heaven. The birds circling as the rings of fragrance rise and seek their dissolution into heaven. What is that fragrance? And if it's love, which it is, how big is love? How can we enlarge that word? Those are the questions I'm left with when I reflect back upon that last line. We're now going into our fourth and final set. How time and place teach us about love. Who knows what triggers love, really? Who knows who or what is going to trigger it next? I'd like to introduce Erin to read Ganges, Thames, Paper Mill. This is a poem about two people from different histories and cultures coming together like two rivers flowing into each other, how some traditions and rituals carry forward into the new current while others drift away. Erin?
Thanks so much, Eliot. We return your grandparents to the Ganges in a single urn. Priests for hire scatter marigolds from their left palms, beg for alms of rice and rupees with the right. Downstream, in another life, I drown a 6-pack of beer in the river. My father wrapped my first trout in foil, charred it over open flame. We still bury our dead in the same overgrown cemetery. I grew up near a river. You played mahout atop double-deck buses that barged through eddies of traffic in London's well-mannered rain, warmed your hands on chapati and chat, the steam-warped walls of your council flat, impressionistic with turmeric and ghee. There's an alphabet of spice, spiked with consonants neither you nor I can taste. We tongue-tie a lullaby of aunties. Anju, Chitra, Sarvani, they tut at you, the bad boy who never learned to speak Hindi. Alone, you're fluent, hands unwind a borrowed sari from my hips. Who can say what rituals will keep? I dog-ear my mother's recipes for leaching stock from each fine bone. You bathe your father's deities in pewter bowls, not to ask for, but to praise. Don't try to steer the river. So you're probably familiar with the two big rivers mentioned there, the Holy River of India and the river that goes through London. But you might be less familiar with Paper Mill Creek, which is the local and kind of historical name for Lagunitas Creek, which runs through Point Reyes Station. My husband's family immigrated via the channels of British colonialism from India to East and South Africa to London, where my husband was born and was a total city boy. And my family on my father's side has been in Point Reyes for generations. They've been ranchers and hunters, so country people. And by the time we met, we were drifting already from certain elements of the past. My husband, as mentioned in the poem, refused to learn Hindi as a child, which he now regrets. I became a vegetarian at 12, so was not involved in the hunting and fishing that was usual in my family. So I thought of these rivers that define our histories and traditions, and it was a good way to speak of the shifting and merging of lives, how rivers are constantly moving, carrying forward where they have been, but also carving the land, creating as they go. So we're going to move now to another place in which a lesson of love was learned by Eliot, City of Angels. This poem is about varieties of attraction and their evanescence, but also about the human need to idealize and indulge in the love of temporary heroes as we move through our temporal, difficult existence before arriving elsewhere. All right, Eliot, it's all yours.
Thanks, Erin. This poem, you can situate yourself in Los Angeles if you care to. City of Angels. When the movie premieres came to our town, the year the war dragged on, we would wander to them from the home my parents had turned into a courtroom. And my boyfriend and I sheepishly held hands as we passed the concrete squares my girlfriend and I had carved with bold initials in front of the house of the famous ophthalmologist who had killed his wife. Then we moved on to the gardens at the edge of the university, where I'd first received the touch of another inside my clothes. And though it was not my boyfriend's touch, he got super excited when I relayed the story while standing in the long line outside the Paramount Theater, inside of which the famous star kept hoisting her sexy body onto a crippled soldier to convince him there is more to life than trauma. And we made out quietly during the scene where the star gently wipes the soldier's gooey chin, then shoots him with yet another gun, which was so close to cleansing and so close to waste, and nearly what growing up felt like and what life still feels like. For there are so many ancient wars inside the body where frustration keeps carving fraudulent initials into quickly disappearing streets. But then again, it's why people need faux heroes as they look for new routes into happiness or truth, which is what he, she, and I hoped for that very electric night, with Klieg lights strafing the sky and the glamorous town in all our varied minds, rooting for us to enter the garden beneath a fresh version of the pantheon of stars. I'm going to just repeat that line, so close to cleansing and so close to waste. I'm always interested in the paradoxes, in the dialectical tensions that are at the core of our experience. As a finale for our reading, Ken's going to share with you a piece about our generation's war. I say that, he and I, not necessarily Erin. As many of you know, there was a draft for Vietnam. The induction sequence was determined by a lottery held once a year during the summer and televised. A low number meant you were headed either for basic training or for Canada. A number higher than about 125 meant you were safe. Ken?
Thanks, Elliot. Well, we've just been to London and India and Los Angeles. So the next logical place is New Jersey, which is where we're going to go. And this is called Lottery Day 1970. We are taking infield practice and shagging flies. Jersey heat dripping from the bills of our caps. Black magic woman on a distant transistor. Kids splashing and shouting in the public pool. The ribbing and the girl talk are on low. Someone hits a ball into the tennis courts. A man in white shorts throws it back gently. Today, the war is coming home. In an hour, my mother will meet me at the door, still in her nightgown, having watched TV all day, as blue plastic capsules were drawn from two separate drums, one of which was full of birthdays. A Winston in her hand, her eyes will be red, but she'll be smiling. All she will say is 316. I backhand a grounder near second. The shortstop turns two. Crickets are out at noon. We're all friends. We're all 19. Our moms at home glued to flickering screens while we're out playing the game we know. As I have been thinking about what other time during my almost 70 years now on Earth was as challenging as these days are, I come to Vietnam in the draft. And I think what saved and in many ways sanctified those days for me was the love of my friends and my mom. Very different loves, to be sure, but both unspoken, as much as they were unflinching and undeniable. So my conclusion is that being open in difficult times and places, the love that is there, though perhaps not obvious or perhaps awkwardly expressed or perhaps not even the love we think we need, seems to be part of the path toward healing. So I'll close with that, and I think probably hand it back briefly to Eliot, but before I do that, I just want to thank everyone for coming. Particularly thank Eliot and Erin. This was a hugely collaborative and fully collaborative effort, really a lot of fun, really kind of heartwarming to work together. Nice to see a number of my friends in the audience, poet colleagues, et cetera, et cetera. And we'd all love to hear from you through our websites or otherwise. But I think, Eliot, back to you for final thoughts, or maybe.
Well, pretty much concur with what you said. We do thank you so much. We hope that being here allowed you for a moment or two to fall in love again with poetry. That's what we really hope. As Ken said, or as Joyce or Richard said, we all have either new books or forthcoming books. You can order them through Joyce's site. You can find us on the web. If any poem particularly moved you and you want to let us know, boy, do we love that. So anyway, stay safe and tack toward the light. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Eliot Schain, Erin Rodoni, and Ken Haas for that beautiful reading and discussion. If you, like Eliot said, look in the chat box for the bookshop.org link that we have Poetry Flash has in collaboration with Mo's Books. scroll down and you'll see the covers of their most recent books. And you can also see a link there or on poetryflash.org to sign up for our email alert list, so you'll know about our virtual events in the future. So thank you, and please check out poetryflash.org. We have some very tasty reviews and poems and new things going up that you're going to enjoy. So thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you.